Hey boys and girls, hi. We're going to do our next two chapters of Charlotte's Web. As you can see, I have changed rooms. I've decided to read in my room where I do most of my teaching. And back here you can see I've got a special guest listening today. Miss V is joining us for our read aloud. And as promised for Noah, today is going to be chapters 15 and 16. And you'll see I wrote a little note that says, thanks Noah, because Noah is in charge of when I do these videos, I send them to his computer and he puts them all up on YouTube. So he's very helpful in helping me get all of this together. So thank you to Noah. And this will be chapters 15 and 16 of Charlotte's Web. When we left off, Mrs. Arable had gone to see the doctor about Fern because she thought it was very unusual that Fern was talking to the animals. And he said, that's perfectly normal. She has a lively imagination. So that's where we left off. And Charlotte had woven the word terrific into the web and now is going to be looking for a new word for Wilbur. So this is chapter 15. This is called The Crickets. This is a short one, so we're going to do 15 and then 16. The crickets sang in the grasses. They sang the song of summer's ending, a sad, monotonous song. The crickets felt it was their duty to warn everyone that summertime cannot last forever. Even on the most beautiful days in the whole year, the days when summer is changing into fall, the crickets spread the rumor of the change. Everybody heard the songs of the crickets. Avery and Fern heard it as they walked the dusty road and knew that school was going to begin soon. The young geese heard it and knew that they would never be goslings again. Charlotte heard it and knew she hadn't much time left. Mrs. Zuckerman, at work in the kitchen, heard the crickets, and a sadness came over her too. Another summer gone, she sighed. Lurvy, who was at work building a crate for Wilbur, heard the song and knew it was going to be time to dig the potatoes. Summer's over and gone, repeated the crickets. The sheep heard the crickets, and they felt so uneasy they broke a hole in the pasture fence and wandered up into the field across the road. The gander discovered the hole and led his family through, and they walked to the orchard and ate the apples that were lying on the ground. A little maple tree in the swamp heard the cricket song and turned bright red. Wilbur was now the center of attraction at the farm. Good food and regular hours were showing results. Wilbur was a pig any man would be proud of. One day, more than 100 people came to stand in his yard and admire him. Charlotte had written the word radiant, and Wilbur looked radiant as he stood in the golden sunlight. Ever since the spider had befriended him, he had done his best to live up to his reputation. When Charlotte's Web said some pig, Wilbur tried very hard to look like some pig. When it said terrific, he tried to look terrific. And now that it said radiant, he did everything possible to make himself glow. It's not easy to look radiant, but Wilbur threw himself into it with will. He would turn his head slightly and blink his long eyelashes. Then he would breathe deeply. And when his audience grew bored, he would spring into the air and do a backflip with a half twist. The crowd would yell and cheer. How's that for a pig? Zuckerman would ask. That pig is radiant. Some of Wilbur's friends, though, in the barn worried that all this attention would go to his head and make him a little stuck up, but it never did. Wilbur was modest. Fame did not spoil him. He still worried some about his future, as he could hardly believe that a mere spider would be able to save his life. Charlotte had worries of her own, but she kept quiet about them. One morning, Wilbur asked her about going to the fair. You are going with me, aren't you, Charlotte? He asked. Well, I don't know, replied Charlotte. Excuse me. The fair comes at a bad time for me. I shall find it inconvenient to leave home, even for a few days. Why? Asked Wilbur. Oh, I just don't feel like leaving my web. Too much going on around here. Please come with me, begged Wilbur. I need you, Charlotte. I can't stand going to the fair without you. You have to come. No, said Charlotte. I believe I better stay home and see if I can get work done. What kind of work? Asked Wilbur. Egg laying. It's time I made an egg sack and filled it with eggs. I didn't know you could lay eggs, said Wilbur in amazement. Oh, sure, said the spider. I'm versatile. What does versatile mean? Full of eggs? Asked Wilbur. Certainly not, laughed Charlotte. Versatile means I can turn with ease from one thing to another. It means I don't have to limit my activities to spinning and trapping. Why don't you come with me to the fair and lay your eggs there? Said Wilbur. It would be wonderful fun. Charlotte gave her web a twitch and moodily watched it sway. I'm afraid not, she said. You don't know the first thing about egg laying, Wilbur. I can't arrange my family duties to suit the management of the county fair. When I get ready to lay eggs, I have to lay eggs, fair or no fair. However, I don't want you to worry about it. You might lose weight. We'll leave it this way. I'll come to the fair if I can. Oh, good, said Wilbur. I knew you wouldn't forsake me just when I needed you the most. All that day Wilbur stayed inside, taking life easy in the straw. Charlotte rested and ate a grasshopper. She knew that she couldn't help Wilbur much longer. In a few days she would have to drop everything and build the beautiful little sack that would hold her eggs. All right, that's a short chapter. So, chapter 14, this one is very exciting. This is called Off to the Fair. I'll show you that picture in just a minute. I'm going to explain what that is. The night before the country fair, everybody went to bed early. Fern and Avery were in bed by 8. Avery lay dreaming that the Ferris wheel had stopped and he was in the top car. Fern lay dreaming that she was in the swings. Lurvy was in bed by 8:30. He lay dreaming about throwing baseballs at a cloth cat and winning a Navajo blanket. Mr. and Mrs. Zuckerman were in bed by 9. Mrs. Zuckerman lay dreaming about a deep freezer. Mr. Zuckerman lay dreaming about Wilbur. He dreamt that Wilbur had grown until he was 116 feet long and 92 feet high, and that he had won all the prizes at the fair and was covered with blue ribbons, and even had a blue ribbon tied to the end of his tail. So here's a picture of what Mr. Zuckerman was dreaming Wilbur looked like. But he was huge. Look how big with all those ribbons. See the one tied to his tail? Isn't that funny? That's what he was dreaming, that Wilbur was huge like that. That would be a very big pig, wouldn't it? Down in the barn cellar, the animals, too, went to sleep early, all except Charlotte. Tomorrow would be fair day. Every creature planned to get up early to see Wilbur off on his great adventure. When morning came, everybody got up at daylight. It was hot. Up the road at the Arable's house, Fern lugged a pail of hot water to her room and cleaned off herself. Then she put on her prettiest dress. Mrs. Arable scrubbed the back of Avery's neck and wet his hair and parted it and brushed it down hard till it stuck to the top of his head. All of about 6 hairs stood up on the top. Avery put on clean underwear, clean blue jeans, and a clean shirt. Mr. Arable dressed, ate breakfast, went out and polished his truck. He had offered to drive everybody to the fair, including Wilbur. Bright and early, Lurvy put clean straw in Wilbur's crate and lifted it into the pig pen. The crate was green with gold letters, and it said, Zuckerman's Famous Pig. Sorry about that. See all that wind back there, boys and girls? See that tree? It's very windy out all of a sudden. It's not funny. You can see both sides over there. Windy, windy day. Charlotte had her web looking fine for the occasion. Wilbur ate his breakfast slowly. He tried to look radiant without getting food in his ears as he ate. In the kitchen, Mrs. Zuckerman suddenly made an announcement. Homer, she said, I'm going to give that pig a buttermilk bath. A what? Said Mr. Zuckerman. A buttermilk bath. My grandma used to bathe her pig with buttermilk when it got dirty. I just remembered. Wilbur's not dirty, said Mr. Zuckerman. He's filthy behind the ears, said Mrs. Zuckerman. Every time Lurvy puts slops in there, the food runs down around his ears and then dries up to form a crust. He also has a smudge on one side where he lays in the manure. He lays in clean straw, said Mr. Zuckerman. Well, he's dirty, and he's going to have a bath. Mr. Zuckerman sat down weakly and ate a donut. His wife went to the woodshed. When she returned, she wore rubber boots and an old raincoat, and she carried a bucket of buttermilk and a small wooden paddle. Edith, you're crazy, mumbled Mr. Zuckerman. But she paid no attention to him. Together they walked to the pig pen. Mrs. Zuckerman wasted no time. She climbed in with Wilbur and went to work. Dipping her paddle in the buttermilk, she rubbed him all over. The geese gathered around to see the fun, and so did the sheep and lambs. Even Templeton poked his head out cautiously to watch Wilbur get a buttermilk bath. Charlotte got so interested she lowered herself on a drag line so she could see better. Wilbur stood with his eyes closed. He could feel the buttermilk trickling down his sides. He opened his mouth and some ran in. It was delicious. He felt radiant and happy. When Mrs. Zuckerman got through and rubbed him dry, he was the cleanest, prettiest pig you had ever seen. All right, now look carefully and see if you see Charlotte. Look behind Mrs. Zuckerman. Do you see her? Oh, yep, she dropped that drag line. They call that to come down and get a closer look. Wilbur certainly does look happy, doesn't he? How fun. He was pure white and pink around the ears and snout and smooth as silk. The Zuckermans went up to change into their best clothes. Lurvy went to shave and put on his plaid shirt and purple necktie. The animals were left to themselves. The 7 goslings paraded around their mom. Please, please, please take us to the fair, they peeped. They all 7 began teasing to go. Please, 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 please. They made quite a racket. Children, snapped the goose, we're staying quietly at home. Only Wilbur is going to the fair. Just then Charlotte interrupted. I shall go too, she said softly. I've decided to go with Wilbur. He may need me. We can't tell what may happen at the fair. Someone's got to go along who knows how to write. And I think Templeton better come too. I might need somebody to run errands and do work. I'm staying right here, grumbled the rat. I haven't the slightest interest in fairs. That's because you've never been to one, said the old sheep. A fair is a rat's paradise. Everybody spills food at a fair. A rat can creep out late at night and have a feast. In the horse barn you will find oats that the trotters and pacers have spilled. In the infield you'll find old peanut butter sandwiches and hard-boiled eggs and parts of cheese. You'll find popcorn and frozen custard and half-eaten candied apples and popsicles and ice cream cones. Everywhere there is food for a rat. A fair has enough disgusting leftover food to satisfy a whole army of rats. Templeton's eyes grew big. Is this true? He asked. Is this appetizing yarn of yours true? I like high living, and what you say tempts me. It's true, said the old sheep. Go to the fair, Templeton. You will find that the conditions at a fair will surpass your wildest dreams. Buckets with sour mash sticking to them, bags with old rotten. That's enough, cried Templeton. Don't tell me any more. I'm going. Good, said Charlotte. She winked at the old sheep. Now then, there's no time to be lost. Wilbur will soon be put into the crate. Templeton and I must get in the crate now and hide ourselves. The rat didn't waste a minute. He scampered over, crawled between the slats, and pulled the straw over him. All right, said Charlotte, I'm next. She sailed into the air, let out a drag line, and dropped gently to the ground. Then she climbed to the side of the crate and slid herself through a knothole on the top board. The old sheep nodded. What a cargo, she said. That sign ought to say Zuckerman's famous pig and 2 stowaways. Look out, the people are coming, said the gander. The big truck with Mr. Arable at the wheel backed slowly down toward the lane. Lurvy and Mr. Zuckerman walked alongside. Fern and Avery were standing in the body of the truck, hanging on the sides. Listen to me, whispered the old sheep to Wilbur. When they open the crate and try to put you in, struggle. Don't go without a tussle. Pigs always resist when they're being loaded. But if I struggle, I'll get dirty. Never mind that. Do as I say. Struggle. If you were to walk into that crate without resisting, Zuckerman might think you were bewitched. He'd be scared to go to the fair. Templeton poked his head out through the straw. Struggle if you must, he said, but kindly remember I'm hiding down here, and I don't want to be stepped on or kicked or pummeled or crushed or squashed or bruised or scarred in any way. Watch what you're doing there, Mr. Radiant, when they shove you in. Be quiet, Templeton, said the sheep. Pull in your head, they're coming. Lay low, Charlotte. Talk it up, geese. The truck backed slowly to the pig pen and stopped. Mr. Arable cut the motor and got out and walked around and lowered the tailgate. The geese cheered. Mrs. Arable got out of the truck. Fern and Avery jumped down. Everybody lined up at the fence, admiring Wilbur. Nobody realized the crate already had a rat and spider inside. "That's some pig," said Mr. Arable. "He's terrific," said Lurvy. "He's very radiant," said Fern, who was remembering the day he was born. "Well," said Mrs. Zuckerman, "he's clean anyway." The buttermilk did help. "Yes, he's a wonderful pig," said Mr. Arable. "It's hard to believe he was the runt of the litter." "You'll get some extra good ham and bacon, Homer, when it comes time for that pig to go." Wilbur heard these words and his heart almost stopped. "I think I'm going to faint," he whispered to the old sheep. "Kneel down," said the sheep. "Let the blood rush to your head." Wilbur sank to his knees and all of his radiance was gone. "Look," said Fern, "he's fading away." "Hey, watch me," said Avery, crawling on to all fours. "I'm a pig, I'm a pig." Avery's foot touched Templeton under the straw. "What a mess," thought the rat. "What fantastic creatures boys are. Why did I let myself do this?" The geese saw Avery in the crate and cheered. "Avery, you get out this instant." "I'm a pig," said Avery, tossing handfuls of straws. "Oink, oink, oink, oink." "The truck's rolling away, Papa," said Fern. The truck, with no one at the wheel, had started to roll downhill. Mr. Arable dashed to the driver's seat and pulled on the brake. "Come out at once," cried Mrs. Arable. Avery crawled out of the crate, making faces at Wilbur, and Wilbur fainted away. "The pig's passed out," said Mrs. Zuckerman. "Throw water on him." "Throw buttermilk," said Avery. The geese cheered. Lurvy ran for a pail of water. "It's sunstroke," said Mr. Zuckerman. "The heat is too much." "Come out of that pig pen immediately," cried Mrs. Arable. Avery obeyed his mother and climbed into the back of the truck. Lurvy returned with cold water and dashed it on Wilbur. "Throw some on me," said Avery. "I'm hot too." "Oh, keep quiet," said Fern. "Keep quiet." Her eyes were brimming with tears. Wilbur, feeling the cold water, came too. He rose slowly to his feet while the geese cheered. "He's up," said Mr. Arable. "I guess there's nothing wrong with him." "I'm hungry," said Avery. "I want a candied apple." "Wilbur's all right now," said Fern. "We can start. I want to take a ride in the Ferris wheel." And here's Wilbur. He had passed out there and fainted, and then Lurvy threw that water on him to wake him up. There he is. Mr. Zuckerman and Mr. Arable and Lurvy grabbed the pig and pushed him toward the crate. Wilbur began to struggle. The harder they pushed, the harder he held back. Avery jumped down and joined them. "Nothing wrong with this pig," said Mr. Zuckerman cheerfully, and pressing his knee against Wilbur. "All together, boys, push." The final heave, they jammed him into the crate. The geese cheered. Lurvy nailed the boards across so Wilbur couldn't get out. Then, using all of his strength, the men picked up the crate and put it on the back of the truck. They did not know that under the straw was a rat inside, and in the knothole was a big gray spider. They only saw the pig. "Everybody in," called Mr. Arable. He started the motor. The ladies climbed in beside him. Mr. Zuckerman and Lurvy and Fern and Avery rode in the back, hanging on the sideboards. The truck began to move ahead, and the geese cheered. The children answered their cheer, and away everybody went to the fair. All right, so chapter 17 is called Uncle, and that's a new character we're going to meet in the story. So, okay, boys and girls, hope you enjoyed 15 and 16, and we'll see you next time for our next chapter called Uncle. Have a good day, everybody. Bye.